Good evening everybody, welcome back to another video from here in North Wales. Today I'm on the Dee estuary and I'm not entirely sure how this video is going to go. Now the reason I say that I'm not sure how this video is going to go is because I've decided to take a little bit of a punt and I'm going to document this video regardless of what happens. But I've come to an area that I've brought you guys to before. I'm at Talacra Beach in the Dee estuary. And as I've mentioned in previous videos, there's a really obvious composition, which is the lighthouse called Point of Ayr. But I want to get away from the obvious compositions. I think this is something that's valuable for everybody to try and think about when visiting locations, is to try and go a little bit further into finding something that is original. And this all started last night when I was on Google Maps and Google Earth, and I was kind of scrolling around the area to see if I could find anything of interest. So this whole area, for miles and miles and miles behind me, is dedicated marshland. It's an estuary, it's very tidal. And I was on Google Earth and Google Maps and I found loads of what looked like really interesting tributaries, such as this one, that are kind of carved into the landscape. And it's really hard to tell on Google Earth the elevation, how the tidal sort of have a tide impact to this location in terms of its accessibility. But there's just something there that I thought could be interesting. It was just the form and it was the potential opportunities, especially around sunset or sunrise, that could create some really nice compositions with the sun and the light on the kind of undulating ridges of the tributaries. But as I mentioned, this is precarious because one, I've not been here before in terms of exploring the marshland. I don't know how accessible it is. And I don't even really know where the best compositions and where the best examples of those little channels are going to be. So I'm going to get the drone up and yeah, we'll take to the sky and see if we can scout something out. Now I'm going to be very careful around here for two reasons. One, because it's marshland, I don't necessarily want to go traipsing and exploring far into this marsh because the terrain could be uneven, it could be quite boggy. So I'm definitely going to kind of proceed with caution. And in terms of taking the drone up, there's another reason that I need to be really careful around here, and that's because it's an important wildlife sanctuary and there's a lot of nesting birds that predominantly nest on the beach and in the estuary, but the little terns are breeding here at the moment and their chicks will be fledging soon, so I don't really want to be flying my drone anywhere near those sites. So I'm going to be flying the drone from way back in a nice isolated area, and I'm going to try and stick to a patch that is quite far away from bird life. I think that's very important for anyone who is flying drones, and if you're out in nature, is we've really got to be careful of, you know, what we're potentially disturbing by being there. So let's take the drone up and let's see if we find anything. Let's cross our fingers and give the video a thumbs up, just because, who knows, that might improve our chances. I'll give anything a go. Well, landscape photography is a notoriously unpredictable endeavour. I will put the drone shots up on screen just because I think that will give you a good indication of what I was hoping to try and find for tonight's photo shoot, but it just hasn't quite gone to plan so far. As I mentioned in the start of this video, I was half expecting it not to go to plan, but I'll explain why after I put some of these photos up on screen. So give it a thumbs up and leave a comment down below and let me know what you think of these photos. So these drone shots have actually turned out better than I'd expected. The light was really nice and I was really just trying to pinpoint and focus on the interesting shapes caused by all of the channels. So these are just a selection of some of my favourite patterns created on the landscape. Now, as I mentioned at the start of this video, I was really unsure of what I was going to get this evening, and I haven't managed to achieve the goal that I'd set out. I just think a lot of these channels are a lot deeper and a lot wider than they sort of first appeared on the Google Earth and Google Maps view that I was looking at, because although those are great, and I'm a big advocate of using both of those pieces of software to find photography locations, I do think it's very important that you come to these locations yourself and scout them out before you come to visit them for the first time, because although they're great to give you an idea of the location, for things like elevation, undulation in the land, accessibility, things like that, they don't necessarily always paint the best picture, and Google Street View isn't necessarily available in somewhere like this because it's quite remote. OS maps or Ordnance Survey maps are probably a better option, because at least they'll give you some indication of the elevation and, you know, the terrain itself. But that being said, I am still hopeful to come back here and explore this further, because I just think it's also the wrong time of day, because the sun is kind of setting over to my left at the moment, which means that the tributaries would sort of be backlit, which is nice if the light is good, but the light isn't great because there's a big bank of cloud on the horizon. But at sunrise, it would actually be rising right in front of some of those channels, and I think that would make for a better composition, because I'm hopeful that I'll get the shot, and if you subscribe and ring the bell, then you'll be able to come along on that venture. But I'm not done. There is a composition that I've seen behind me, and I've got my 20mm f1.8 lens out, because there's a nice piece of foreground here that I think will salvage this shoot, and I'm hopeful to try and get it before the light goes, but this is a bit hit and miss at this point. But there's this piece of driftwood here along the bank of one of these channels, and because it's lay in the vegetation and because it's driftwood, it's very white, it's catching the light really nicely, and it's contouring it, and it's contrasting really nicely against the ground that it's laying on. Now, I'm trying this in a vertical and also in a landscape orientation, because I'm not quite sure what will work best, but either way I want to get really close to this particular sweeping piece of wood. I want to get real close, so I'm going to focus stack it. I'm going to try and include some of the channel just to add a little bit of a diagonal and hopefully lead the eye into the frame. We'll get a little bit of colour in the sky, but again, I'm not necessarily too hopeful, because like I said, the sun is heading for that bank of cloud as we speak, so I'm going to rush to try and get this shot, and if it turns out any good, I will put it on screen now. So I just about caught the light in these two compositions, but the sky just wasn't particularly interesting, so I decided to crop it out and just focus on the foreground and the channel leading out of the frame. Would love to know which you prefer, the landscape or the portrait. I'm a little bit on the fence, not too sure, so let me know down in the comments. Well, I think this video was the perfect example of why in landscape photography we don't always necessarily come back with the photos that we were hoping for. It's just the nature of the beast. But I have had a really enjoyable evening, so I'm going to head back along the beach. I'm probably just going to chill out here and wait for the sunset, because, well, as you can see, there's a big bank of cloud, but this is just a beautiful place to relax of an evening. So if you don't get your photos that you're hoping for, at least enjoy being out in the landscape, out in the wildlife and in nature, because hey, that's what landscape photography is all about for me. So if you have enjoyed this very kind of anticlimactic and slightly disappointing video, but what I would like to think is a very real video of the reality of coming out and doing landscape photography, then do make sure to give it a thumbs up. I promise you, not every video and every outing is as photographically disappointing as this one. So if you have enjoyed this video, then do give it a thumbs up and subscribe and ring the bell so you can get notified of when new videos come out, which is every Thursday at around 5 p.m. And stick around, because there are some cool locations and some great photo opportunities coming up in the next few weeks that I would love for you guys to come along to as well. Just to let you know, I have released a new blog on my website. It's called The Photographer's Journal, and it's just a way that I can share some more behind the scenes things from these videos, more photos, more techniques, tips, and stories from here in the field. So I'll leave a link for that down in the description. If you want more information about some of the techniques, some of the editing tips that I give, and just some more images from some of these videos, then be sure to check that out and subscribe to my newsletter to get notified of when those blog posts go live. As always, Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next Thursday.